I never thought an ordinary evening would turn into the night that shattered everything I believed about love, family, and trust. I had been out most of the day, just doing little things. Errands, groceries, stopping at the store for a few things I needed. Nothing unusual, nothing worth remembering. But when I decided to stop by my mom's house before going home, I didn't realize I was driving straight into a nightmare. The road to my mom's has always been familiar. I could drive it in my sleep. I've taken it so many times that every curve, every tree, every mailbox feels like part of my childhood. Usually, I'd feel calm on that road, almost comforted, like I was on my way to the safest place in the world. But that evening, something felt different. I couldn't explain it then. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was the way the air seemed heavier, like the sky itself was holding its breath. When I turned into the gravel path leading to her gate, that's when my stomach dropped. Sitting there, parked in plain sight as if it belonged there, was my fiancé's truck. At first, my brain couldn't process it. I blinked, stared, even rubbed my eyes like maybe I was imagining things. But no, it was his. The same dent on the side, the same little sticker on the back window. It was his truck, without question. My heart started racing, my palms sweaty on the steering wheel. Why was he here? Why would he be at my mom's house when he never mentioned coming? A part of me tried to reason it out. Maybe he was planning a sweet surprise. Maybe he wanted to talk to my mom about something for the wedding. I even let myself imagine that he was inside, asking for a family recipe or arranging some kind of sweet gesture for me. That hope lasted about 30 seconds until my gut twisted in a way I couldn't ignore. Because something didn't feel right. Something felt off. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at that truck, frozen in place. I couldn't decide whether to turn around and leave or march right up and find out what was happening. Every second felt heavier, pressing down on my chest. And then, before I even knew what I was doing, I opened the door, stepped out, and started walking toward the gate. The gravel crunched under my shoes, every step sounding louder than the last. My hands were shaking. My throat felt dry. I moved carefully, slowly, almost like I was walking into enemy territory instead of my mom's safe little home. And then I heard it. His voice. Low, steady, familiar, but not tender. Not the way he spoke to me when it was just us. His tone was different, sharper, harder. It made me stop in my tracks, my whole body stiff. I leaned closer, my ears straining, but the words were muffled. Still, I knew something was wrong, because in that tone, there was no love. There was no warmth. I crept closer, pressing myself against the wall near one of the windows, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it inside. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then I heard another voice, my mom's. And it didn't sound like her. It wasn't soft and warm the way she usually was. It was tight, strained, like she was uncomfortable, maybe even afraid. The sound of her voice like that cut through me worse than anything else. I froze. My head spun. Why was she uncomfortable? Why was he even there without telling me? I pressed myself closer to the wall, focusing on their words. That's when the truth began to slip out, word by word, like little daggers. I couldn't catch everything, but I caught enough. The way he spoke to her, it wasn't respectful, it wasn't kind. It was full of something I can only describe as poison. His words dripped with entitlement, with control, with something darker. And then he mentioned me. Hearing my name in his voice, in that tone, made me sick. The man I thought I was going to marry was talking about me, like I wasn't even human. Like I was just a piece in his life he could control, manage, and mock. He spoke about me as if our love meant nothing. And worse, he spoke about my mom, the woman who raised me, who gave me everything, with disrespect that cut me to the bone. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. My knees felt weak. I wanted to burst in, to scream, to demand answers. But at the same time, I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, glued to the spot, listening to the unraveling of everything I thought was safe. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. This wasn't just about a fiancé at the wrong place. This was about something uglier, something that reached beyond love. It was about power, about disrespect, about prejudice that he had kept hidden from me until now. And I stood there, frozen in shock, realizing that the future I thought I was building was built on lies. But what I didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. Because the moment I decided to open that door, everything would explode. My hand shook as it pressed against the doorknob. For a moment, I hesitated. My heart begged me to turn around, to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything at all. But my soul, my very bones, knew I couldn't. I had already heard too much. My silence would only give him power, and deep down, I knew if I stayed outside any longer, I'd break apart. So I turned the knob and pushed. The door swung open with a crack, slamming against the wall so hard the frame shook. Both of them froze. My mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide, her face pale. My fiancé? No, the stranger I suddenly didn't recognize, stood a few feet from her, too close, his body tense, his jaw tight, his expression twisted as he saw me, caught in the act. For a split second, there was silence. The kind of silence that ams louder than any words. My chest heaved, my breath short and ragged. I stared at him, searching his face for the man I thought I knew. The man who had held my hand through long nights, who had promised me forever, who had spoken of building a life together. But the eyes staring back at me weren't his. They were cold, calculating. "What are you doing here?" The words came out of me broken, trembling, yet sharp enough to cut the air. He didn't flinch. He didn't stumble over excuses. He just sneered, his lips curling as though I were the intruder. "Funny," he said. "I should be asking you the same thing." My blood ran cold. I turned to my mom, whose hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her shoulders stiff, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. That look alone told me everything. She wasn't safe. She wasn't comfortable. And she had been trying to protect me from hearing it. "What's going on?" I whispered, my voice shaking so badly it barely carried. But he laughed. He actually laughed. It was a sound so cruel, so unlike him, that it sent a chill up my spine. "You really don't know, do you?" he said, as if I was some naive child. "You've been so blind, Alec. Blind to me, blind to your family, blind to the truth." I felt my stomach knot, my hands balled into fists at my sides. "What truth?" I demanded, my voice cracking. And that's when he let it out. Not just the betrayal, not just the lies, but the venom. He spoke about me as though I were nothing. He mocked my choices, my dreams, my worth. And then, God, I can still hear it. He turned it toward my mom. The words he used, the tone in his voice, They weren't just disrespectful. They were hateful, laced with something heavy and poisonous. Words born from prejudice, words soaked in the kind of ugliness that generations have fought to silence. He spoke as if we were beneath him, as if love gave him permission to trample over who we were, where we came from, what we stood for. I felt my whole body shaking. Rage boiled inside me, colliding with heartbreak until I thought I might explode. My mom sat frozen, her lips pressed tight, her face pale, her strength holding her together, even as his words tried to tear her apart. "Stop!" My voice came out sharper this time, firmer, though my insides were collapsing. "Don't you dare talk about her that way." He turned toward me slowly, that twisted smirk still carved into his face. "Or what?" he challenged. "You'll leave me? You think anyone else will want you? You think you're better than me? You and your family." I couldn't let him finish. "Enough!" The scream tore out of me, raw and broken, but louder than anything I'd ever said in my life. My voice echoed through the room, bouncing off the walls, silencing even his cruel laughter. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, but surprise. Surprise that I wasn't cowering. Surprise that I was standing tall. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my mom, for every word he had thrown like a knife, for every ounce of dignity he had tried to strip away from us, for every woman who had ever been silenced, every family that had been disrespected, every voice that had been told to stay quiet. I stepped closer, my hands trembling, but my eyes locked on his. "Get out," I said, my voice low, steady, final. He scoffed, tried to brush past me like my words meant nothing, but I didn't move. I stood in the doorway, blocking his path, shaking but unbroken. "Get out." The weight of my voice filled the room. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He grabbed his keys off the table, muttered something under his breath, and stormed past me, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. And just like that, he was gone. But the silence he left behind wasn't peace. It was heavy, suffocating, broken. I turned to my mom, and that's when the tears came. She opened her arms, and I lapsed into them, sobbing like I hadn't cried in years. She stroked my hair, whispering, "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But we both knew it wasn't, because nothing about this was okay. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of facing the truth. That night, after he stormed out and the silence swallowed the house, I sat there in my mom's arms, shaking so badly I thought I might never stop. My chest ached, my eyes burned from crying, and my throat felt raw from the screams I had forced out. My mom kept whispering, "It's okay, baby. I've got you." But we both knew those words weren't really true. Nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be the same again. When I finally pulled away, I saw her face, tired, pale, but strong. She tried to smile, but it broke halfway, her lips trembling. I wiped my tears with the back of my sleeve and asked her the question that had been clawing at my chest since I opened that door. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice came out more like a whisper than a question, but I knew she heard it. She lowered her eyes, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "Because, Alec," she said softly, "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought maybe he'd change. Maybe he'd show you the side of him you thought you loved. and the uglier part would never come out. Her words stabbed deeper than anything he had said because they revealed the truth. My mom had already seen the side of him I didn't. She had already been carrying that weight, keeping it from me, protecting me even as she suffered. Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they weren't just from pain. They were from guilt. You went through this for me? You let him talk to you like that because of me? She reached out, cupping my face gently. Baby, that's what mothers do. We take it, we endure it, if it means our children get to feel happy, even if just for a little while. Her words shattered me all over again, because I realized this wasn't just betrayal between me and him. It was betrayal against her, against everything she had ever given me. He had stood in her house, the place that had always been our sanctuary, and filled it with poison. I sat there, holding her hand, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on me. Because his words weren't just personal. They carried the same cruelty so many before us had endured. Disrespect, prejudice, dismissal. My heart pounded as I realized this wasn't just about a broken engagement. This was about something far bigger. Later that night, after my mom had finally convinced me to lie down, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The shadows on the walls seemed heavier, the silence louder. My mind kept replaying everything I had heard, his voice mocking me, belittling my mom, his words soaked in hate. Each time the memory surfaced, it felt like a fresh cut, and I bled all over again. I wanted to text him, to scream through the phone, to demand answers, but I stopped myself. What good would it do? I had already heard the truth. He had already shown me who he really was. No amount of words could erase what I had witnessed. Instead, I thought about the future I had once dreamed of with him, the wedding, the home, the family. I realized it had all been built on sand. It was never real. The man I thought I loved never existed, not truly. He was just a mask, and the moment it slipped, everything crumbled. As the hours dragged by, I thought about my mom, about the strength it must have taken for her to face him before I knew the truth. I thought about the countless women before us who had endured the same kind of degradation, who had stayed silent because they felt they had no choice. And I thought about how close I had come to joining them, to living my whole life with someone who would have slowly erased me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the woman I was. That thought terrified me more than anything else. When the first light of morning filtered through the curtains, I sat up, exhausted but awake. My mom was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee, moving quietly, as though the walls themselves were fragile. I walked in, sat at the table, and for a long time, we didn't speak. The only sound was the coffee dripping, the clock ticking, and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Finally, I broke the silence. I can't marry him. I can't even look at him again. My mom set a cup in front of me, her eyes soft but filled with pride. I know, baby, and I'm proud of you. Those words hit me hard. Proud. It had been so long since I had thought about myself in that way. For so long, I had bent, twisted, and shrunk myself just to keep the peace, to keep the love, to keep the illusion alive. But now, sitting there in the quiet morning light, I felt something shift. A seed of strength, small but real, rooting itself inside me. Still, the fear lingered. What if he came back? What if he refused to let go? What if his anger turned into something worse? The thought made my chest tighten, and I realized the story wasn't over. It wouldn't end just because I said it should. Because men like him don't always walk away quietly. And as I sat there, sipping my coffee with trembling hands, I understood that the storm was far from over. The worst, perhaps, was still coming. The days that followed felt like walking on broken glass. Every step, every thought, every breath was sharp, cutting into me in ways I didn't expect. I kept telling myself it was over, that I was free, that I had slammed the door on him and everything he brought into my life. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. People like him don't just vanish, they come back. And when they do, they don't come with apologies. They come with anger. For a while, I tried to hold myself together. I went back to work, smiled when people asked me how the wedding planning was going, and lied through my teeth when they asked about him. I told myself I needed time before I explained, but the truth was simpler. I was ashamed. Ashamed of what I had let happen. Ashamed that I hadn't seen who he was until it was too late. At night, when the house was quiet, I would sit in bed replaying every moment of our relationship. The little red flags I had ignored, the jokes he made that weren't funny, the way he sometimes spoke to waiters, or how his voice would tighten when certain topics came up. I had brushed them off, convinced myself they weren't important, because I wanted so badly to believe in the good. But now, those memories screamed at me, and I couldn't silence them. And then, one evening, just as I was beginning to think maybe, just maybe, I could start healing, it happened. A knock on the door. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't patient. It was sharp, angry, rattling the frame as if the person on the other side had no intention of waiting. My heart stopped. My mom, sitting beside me on the couch, stiffened. We didn't need to look at each other to know who it was. I stood frozen, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay put. But the knocking grew louder, harder. His voice followed, muffled through the wood, but unmistakable. "Alec! Open the door! We need to talk!" My mom's hand shot out, gripping mine. Her palm was warm, but her grip was strong, grounding me in that moment. "Don't," she whispered. "Not tonight." But the pounding didn't stop. "Alec, I know you're in there." Tears stung my eyes as fear wrapped itself around my throat. This was the moment I had dreaded. He wasn't gone. He hadn't let go. And now he was here, at the very door that had once been my safe place. I wanted to scream at him to leave, but the words caught in my chest. I wanted to hide, but there was no hiding. My mom squeezed my hand again, her eyes locked on mine. "We'll get through this," she mouthed silently. The banging went on for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. His voice grew harsher, louder, calling me names, mocking me, demanding answers I didn't owe him. I could feel the hate dripping from every syllable. He wasn't here to make things right. He was here to remind me of his power, or at least the power he thought he still had. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not in the way it had before, not in pain, not in despair. This break was different. It was the kind of break that clears the way for strength to finally grow. I stood up, my mom tugging at my sleeve as if to hold me back, but I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Not anymore." I walked toward the door, each step heavy but sure. My heart was pounding, my body trembling, but I knew what I had to do. I pressed my hand against the door, took a deep breath, and spoke loudly enough for him to hear. You need to leave. Now. You don't belong here anymore. And you will never, ever come back. There was silence on the other side. Then, a laugh. Low, cruel, mocking. You think you can get rid of me that easily, Alec? He sneered. You think anyone else will ever want you? You think you can erase me? His words cut. But this time, they didn't destroy me. Because I realized he was wrong. I didn't need anyone else to want me. I didn't need his validation, his approval, his so-called love. All I needed was the truth. And I had it now. My voice grew steadier. I don't need you. I don't want you. And you will never have the power to hurt me or my family again. I held my breath, waiting for his response. For a moment, I thought he would break the door down, that his anger would spill into the room and swallow me whole. But then, slowly, the footsteps retreated. His truck roared to life, the headlights slicing through the curtains, and then he was gone. The silence afterward was deafening. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor, shaking, sobbing, gasping for air. My mom rushed to me, pulling me into her arms again. His time, though. The tears felt different. They weren't just from fear or heartbreak. They were from release. Because in that moment, I knew I had taken back something he had tried to steal from me. My voice, my strength, my power. But as I lay there, clinging to my mom, I also knew this story wasn't just mine. His words, his hate, the poison he carried, they weren't new. They were part of a much larger, darker pattern, one that had scarred countless others before me. And that realization lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about speaking, about refusing to let silence protect injustice any longer. And for the first time, I began to see that maybe, just maybe, the end of my engagement was the beginning of something much bigger. The morning after he left, the house was so quiet, it felt almost sacred. Sunlight poured in through the curtains, touching every corner of the living room where I had collapsed the night before. It should have felt like peace. It should have felt like relief. But instead, it felt heavy, almost haunting, like the echoes of his voice still lingered in the walls. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. My mom moved softly around me, her presence gentle but steady, as if she knew I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't ready to put words to what had happened, not yet. But the silence was its own kind of truth. I thought back to who I was just months ago, bright-eyed, hopeful, planning a wedding I thought would lead me into a lifetime of love and safety. I had pictured a future with him, built on trust, laughter, and dreams. And now, here I was, with that future reduced to ashes. But as painful as it was, something inside me understood. Maybe it was better to see the fire now, rather than let it burn me alive later. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was realizing who he had been all along, and how blind I had been to the cracks in his mask. The hardest part was knowing that, as the poison he carried wasn't just his, it was inherited, passed down, shared, and normalized. His cruelty wasn't born overnight. It came from a world that had always given men like him permission to look at women like me, families like mine, and see something less. Something unworthy. That realization sat like a stone in my chest. But the longer I held it, the more I began to see it differently. Maybe it wasn't a weight meant to drag me down. Maybe it was a stone I could build on. I started writing. At first, it was just scraps of thoughts. Anger, pain, questions that had no answers. Then slowly it became more. It became a voice, my voice, rising out of the silence I had once thought was safer than truth. I wrote about betrayal, about prejudice, about the danger of ignoring the red flags we're taught to excuse. I wrote about the way hate hides behind charm, how it can sit across the dinner table smiling while sharpening its knives under the cloth. My mom read some of what I wrote. She cried, but not in sadness. She cried because she said it felt real. Because she said it felt like not just my story, but hers, and her mother's, and every woman who had ever carried wounds they didn't ask for. And in that moment, I realized something even bigger. This wasn't just a personal heartbreak. It was a mirror, reflecting a truth too many people still pretend not to see. The betrayal, the words, the venom. It was all rooted in something much older than me, much older than him. It was rooted in prejudice, in systems and beliefs that whisper lies about worth, lies about love, lies about who deserves what. And while my story ended with a door slammed shut, too many others don't. Too many others end in silence, or worse, in tragedy. I thought about that for days, letting it swirl in my head, until one night I sat down with my mom and said, I can't keep this to myself anymore. People need to hear it. She nodded, her eyes full of both pride and worry. If you tell it, she said, tell it true. Don't make it smaller. Don't make it prettier. Say it the way it was, even if it hurts. So here I am, saying it the way it was. Yes, my heart was broken. Yes, I was betrayed. But this isn't just about a broken engagement. It's about the masks people wear and the hate they hide. It's about how prejudice doesn't just live in the streets or on the news. It lives in our homes, in our relationships, in the very people we think we can trust most. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Not that I lost someone I thought I loved, but that for so long, I didn't see who he truly was. And I wonder, how many others are living with that same blindness right now? How many others are sitting at dinner tables with someone who smiles sweetly, only to speak venom when the doors close? How many others are being chipped away by words designed to make them feel small, unworthy, less? I don't have all the answers. I don't know if the world will ever fully change. But I do know this. Silence is no longer an option. I will not carry his words in secret. I will not let his hate be the final chapter of my story. Because my story isn't just about pain. It's about survival. It's about truth. It's about reclaiming power that was almost stolen from me. And it's about refusing to let the poison of hate define the rest of my life. So to anyone listening, whether you've lived this yourself or you've seen it in someone you love, I want you to ask yourself, how many more stories like mine must there be before we finally say enough? How many more lives will be scarred by prejudice before we decide it cannot be hidden, not even in love? The night he walked out of my life, I thought it was the end. But looking back now, I see it was the beginning. The beginning of my voice, the beginning of my truth, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of change. So I'll leave you with this. My name is Alec Rose. This is my story, and I refuse to let it be forgotten.
Think about it. Could this happen to you? Some stories aren't just heard, they're felt. Behind every truth, there's a hidden fear. This story won't just shake your mind, it'll haunt your soul. Who could imagine the truth would be this terrifying? The story ends, but the questions stay alive.